Hey everyone, it's me, Lauren, your creative mentor. And today slash this month, I'm going to talk about what you do when you leave a job. And that's kind of like an interesting thing to think about, but I think it's a situation that's going to be relevant to a lot of us in the upcoming rest of the year. And something that happened to a lot of us in the pandemic. We were either asked to leave, whether we were furloughed, fired, or we quit, or blindsided by something, or we're looking for better offers these days. There's all sorts of reasons to leave a company. So, you know, when I first had to leave a company, I aged out of my job because I worked at like a college job. And then when you graduate college, you can't keep your college job on campus, so you have to do something else. So that was the first time I ever had to leave a job. And then the next time I had to leave a job, I was asked to leave. And we'll get into all of that stuff. But first, if this is your first time here, my name is Lauren. I have 8 years of graphic design experience, and this podcast is for you. I remember being an art student and just being like, what the hell? How does any of this work? And then through the pandemic on TikTok, a lot of you were doing that on TikTok. And so half needing something to do and half being frustrated that that wasn't really getting any better, I made this. And so this is just a free resource that is so ready to stop all the gatekeeping, and I just want this to help anybody who's out there. But if someone is going to give you advice about your money, your career, or your mental health, which I do all three things, I think you need to vet that person and make sure that they are someone you want to listen to. So if you're listening to me on YouTube or anything like that, there's always links in the description to have access to my LinkedIn so that you can see if I am someone you want to emulate or listen to. That being said, I'm going to keep talking. So today I want to just talk about, like, in general, like what happens when you get fired, you know? It sucks getting fired. It doesn't feel good to get fired, whether you knew you were going to be fired or not. I will venture to say it probably happens at least once in your career. I've only been fired once. I haven't ever been fired since. And it's really weird. It's a weird time. And I'm the kind of worker, I guess I'll just tell you the story. So I'm the kind of worker that gets really engaged in their job. Like, I'm either doing it or I'm not. So it was my first design job ever. It was like way back in like 2013. And I think I was 24 when this happened. And I had been at this job for like 3 years. I started a department. I went in every day. I was the first one like in and the last to leave. And I just really liked my job. I thought I was really good at it. And then something happened in my personal life where, I lost someone in my family. And I was dealing with something that kind of caught up with me from my past that was emotional and psychological. And so with those two things, that was like a lot to handle. So I started going to therapy regularly. And I started going like every week regularly. And I didn't so much tell my job that because it's a medical issue that's none of their business. So I just asked for this permission to leave 30 minutes early once a week and was dealing with my life the best way I know how. Now, granted, I'm only giving you one perspective of this story and it's mine, but about 2 weeks after I started doing that, and I'll be honest, I was clashing with my manager. He would come and yell at me and he would get mad I wasn't doing things right, but he wasn't telling me what he wanted me to do instead. So I didn't really I was figuring that out too. And it was just like a rough ride for a second. And I made a mistake on a shipping label and an order didn't get somewhere on time. It's been a while, honestly. I don't really remember, but I remember going into work the next day having no idea. I didn't get a pink slip. I didn't get a talking to. I wasn't given an opportunity to do better. Like, none of those things that are normal to happen happened. And my manager pulled me aside like bright and early at the beginning of the day and told me that they were letting me go for that shipping mistake and that they didn't think I was engaged in my job anymore, or that, like, you know, I was doing well. And so that caught me so off guard. I just didn't even know what to do. And my coworkers didn't see it coming. Like, nobody really saw it coming. And after a lot of years and a lot of like learning how working works, I realized now that that was unusual and that was weird. Granted, I worked for a local company. They were doing their own thing the best way they knew how. But like, that isn't a normal way for something like that to go. But at the time, all I knew is, wow, I didn't think this was going to happen to me. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my therapy anymore. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. Like, I have no idea, like, what to do. How do you deal with this? And it was really awful. It was so awful because you feel like a failure. You feel like you aren't good at what you thought you were good at. You don't have the best attitude that you thought you did. Like, you question absolutely everything about what you know, especially about working. You lose all of these personal connections and relationships of people you see every single day in the drop of a hat. And it's just a huge, sudden adjustment that doesn't feel fair, ever. And so when you're fired, you're super emotional and you go into panic mode and you just can't even think and you don't know what to do. So I'm going to tell you now what you should do. If you are ever fired or let go from a job for a reason that isn't something extreme like insubordination or sexual harassment or something where you're breaking company policy like really hard, and if you're fired for any reason, immediately once you get home, file for unemployment. Every business who has employees has to pay for unemployment insurance, and that is what funds that for everybody. Now, depending on what state you are in, unemployment and how you are rewarded a certain amount and how you keep that is different a little bit for everybody. For me, this happened in the state of Virginia. So what happens when you file for unemployment in Virginia in 2015? you file, and then the department takes about a day or two to process that, and then they call you and get your side of the story, and then they call your old job and get their side of the story. And then what you're supposed to do is both be on the line and like discussing what amount of unemployment per week you should get. Now, I think my boss didn't want to fire me, but he had to. So I didn't actually have that interaction. He told my unemployment agent, give her the max of whatever she's eligible for. So I got the max, which was at the time $275 a week. So, which was about what I was making anyway. And so, after that, then they like give you this whole account, and then you have a direct deposit into your bank every like Friday or Monday or whatever it is, where you get your unemployment benefit. And there is a time limit on it, but it's like 18 months or something like that. Maybe that's determined in it too. I don't remember or recall. And then after that, what you have to do is prove to your unemployment officer that every week you are looking for a job or you are applying to a job. And at the time, I don't know if it's like this now, but essentially applying to at least 2 Indeed jobs a week and showing like letters if they responded or going on interviews, just showing proof of all of that. You would submit that into your portal or whatever once a week, and then you would get your benefit for the next week. So I spent about 6 months on unemployment. I was genuinely looking for jobs, but when you make $275 a week, which is maybe like $20 less than I was making at my job, And then, because I was $10 an hour at my job, and then you're looking at minimum wage jobs to like figure it out or whatever. That's that like in between place that you hear a lot of discourse about now with unemployment, where people don't want to go work jobs that make less than unemployment. But unemployment is a determined amount from your old job. So it's not that people are freeloaders on unemployment. Everybody who is working or was working with you establishes that worth for you to be paid that anyway. So people, in my opinion, who get very bent out of shape about people on unemployment and relying on the government, all of the businesses who have employees fund the unemployment amount and all agree upon it. And it's still less than your paycheck, but it's enough to get you by. And so, like, that bewilders me. And I truly think people who have a lot of opinions about how unemployment works have never been unemployed in the sense that they were relying on unemployment. So I just kind of want you to understand that that's how that works. And then when the pandemic hit and everybody was laid off or furloughed, or we were all waiting to see what to do next, they added that extra $600 benefit on top of the regular unemployment. So if this whole scenario happened to me last year, I would have been making $275 plus the federal benefit of $600, because the $275 would have been the state of Virginia and then the $600 was federal, giving me what, $875 a week. Of course, I'm going to sit on that until I get a killer job. Like, that just makes sense to people. And so, like, there's a lot of discourse going into a lot of things about that. But we're focusing on what happens when you get fired today. So that's how that works. And when you come home from work after being fired, you're going to be emotional and it's going to feel like garbage. You're going to feel like trash when that happens. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it goes. So what I do, or what I did, and what I recommend you do if you're ever fired, is just sit in the fire. Like, just be fired for a week. Just be upset. Don't worry about your next move. Don't freak out. Like, just mourn the fact that you've lost this daily routine, and like, don't put pressure on yourself to get a job tomorrow. Don't pick up your resume. Don't do any of that stuff for a week. The only job you have after you lose your job is to get on unemployment and just sit there for a minute. Because once you're done being emotional, you can start making rational decisions for yourself. And that's what you're going to need the most. And a lot of people are really worried about what they're going to do next. And I'm not going to say it's perfect or that it's easy or any of these things, but when you have a fire under your ass, especially as a creative person, you will come up with something. We all have done it in one way or another for one reason or another. You'll get on Patreon, or you'll get on Etsy or something, where you'll ask your uncle for if you can help him for this and that and the other, or you'll find something to get paid under the table while you like figure all of this out. Like, we all figure it out, and you're no different. So if you're ever fired, the first thing you do is just get on unemployment and just freak out for a week and just feel all your feelings. Because then what you're going to do after that is you're going to update your portfolio, you're going to update your resume, and you are going to look up at every resource on the planet that is online for free right now. You're going to go on Job Dr. Tessa's TikTok, you're going to go on the Self-Made Millennial YouTube channel, and you're going to figure out how in an interview you are going to talk about how and why you were fired and why you're looking for this job. Because when it's your last job or your only job you have, which was what my problem was, you are going to have to spin that shit into gold. I was doing this and I felt short here, and what I learned from this event in my life were that these things, and this is how I've worked to improve it. And when you look at this thing, then you can see that this is better. This is also a great answer to like tell me your greatest weakness. Spin shit into gold. And those two accounts that I mentioned, which I'll link in the show notes and in the description, those are going to help you. They address all those really tricky questions you don't know how to articulate your answer to, and they just help you frame it in a way that's honest, because that's really important, you know? Like, this happened. You can't fake it away. You can't pretend it didn't happen. Being fired sucks, and for so many reasons for such a long time. But it happens, whether it's fair or unfair. You have to deal with the damage control and the perception that's left there. Sometimes, depending on the circumstance, this was my circumstance, you can still get a letter of recommendation from the people you used to work with. That's what I did, because I knew, I could see it in my boss's face because he almost cried when he fired me, that he didn't want to. And I go into like emergency mode. I'm one of those people where if like a disaster is happening, I create the plan and the path and start pointing people where they should go. So when I was fired, that wasn't really different. And my boss kind of started rambling afterwards, and I just said, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go pack my desk. I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to email you. And you're going to email me a letter of recommendation, and I'm going to just figure this out. And then my boss is like, okay. So that, depending on your circumstance, that is an option. That's fine. And that's appropriate to do. And like, you're going to need that if you can get it. You're going to need all the help you can get. So that is essentially what happens when you get fired. And then you'll look for jobs for a while, and then you'll find a new one, or you'll take that time and start your own project or start your own business. And who knows, maybe it'll take off. That is also literally what I did. I spent 6 months on unemployment, genuinely looking for work. But my buddy and I at the time, we were kind of starting this like streetwear brand thing. So I had time to like learn how Squarespace worked and watch Skillshare classes and, you know, get better at like digital design and get better at like all these things. And I started designing t-shirts, and Threadless came around for the first time, really. I ran a whole GoFundMe thing. Like, I did all of this all day long because I was just home all day getting paid my little unemployment, but it was enough for me because I didn't have a family or anything, like anyone relying on me. And I had a roommate, and she was so much fun, and she'd be at work all day, and I would just kind of cook us dinner and hang out. And like, we had a good little system going on. And so I built this whole thing that started to do well. And that's how I moved to Los Angeles for a year. And so I saved up, like, I kept my life savings, and then I saved up a little extra cash on unemployment, and I worked on this thing, and I moved to LA, and then I started like actually working again. Because also, by the way, when you move across the country to a whole other state, people are a little less concerned with why you were fired down the street. So I'm not saying you need to be that drastic. I'm just saying that that is an avenue that exists. And again, as creatives, like, this shit is wild. I also want to mention too, if you are someone who had benefits when you lose your job, you will go into the Cobra Benefit thing. So you will lose your benefits. They'll probably finish out the month that you were on them. And unemployment doesn't really offer you any additional stuff. You just go straight into the marketplace. So the best thing you can do is just don't do anything where you'll get injured, because you're going to be paying cash for that shit. And so it's a weird time. It's a weird time to suddenly lose your job and have to overwhelmingly like start over, you know? It sucks to look at your resume when you weren't ready to, but the best thing you can do also as a creative, like, even if you have no intention of taking on contract work, reach out to recruiters and have them look at your resume for you. I still do that, and like, I'm working happily. Like, once every couple of months or every like year or so, I reach out to my old recruiters that helped me find some contracts here in Chicago, and I just go, hey, I like updated my resume, like how is this faring out in the world right now? What do you recommend? And all these things, and then they'll like workshop it with me, and then I know, and they'll offer me some side work, and I'll take it or I won't. But like that's a great thing to do when you're overwhelmed like that. And that is also why I will say the second you have portfolio worthy work ready to publish and you're allowed to publicly publish it, just like suck it up one day and make the page, even if you're doing it at work. I would do that all the time just to keep track of everything. When I knew that a product I had worked on either a website for or a photo shoot for or anything I was doing, once that product was consumer facing on the release date and all of that stuff went live, I will have had a page on my website that was inaccessible to the rest of the world, and I will have put all the work there, written it out, credited my teammates for the parts of the work that they did, and then I just publish it the day that I know that I can, or I at least have all these pages back here where I can upload them and publish them whenever I want. And when you do it that way, then if you have 9 pieces you need to update in your portfolio, or even 3, that's so overwhelming, especially when you're like really beaten down by the fact you lost that job you made them at. Just keep your portfolio up to date as it happens. Because the other thing that will happen if you do that is people will look at your work when you're not even looking for a job, and they will come out of the woodwork and find your skills to be growing and relevant. And recruiters, I'm not kidding, recruiters are crawling all over LinkedIn looking for you. You never know who is going to knock on your door. You never ever know who is connected to someone who's connected to a recruiter who's going to do that thing we all do. We all hop around the internet one link at a time to get everywhere. You have no idea who you know on LinkedIn who has a recruiter behind them doing that to get to you to look at all of your work. So keep your portfolio updated as much as possible, as much as you're legally allowed to, so that people like that can find you, because you truly never know. And that is also, if you think feeling shitty because you were fired is an extreme feeling, imagine just minding your own business and a recruiter finds you and offers you the like most cartoonish thing in the world that you could never dream of, but you want. And that is what can happen if you just keep all that stuff up to date. So truly, keep a LinkedIn profile. I cannot stress that enough. Keep a LinkedIn profile. Update it constantly. Put links to your portfolio pages as is relevant to your job description in there. Look at mine. I swear to God. Look at mine. I'll tell you a story some other time about how my LinkedIn page set me up for the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm not going to tell you right now, but I will soon. But just look at my LinkedIn page and follow suit. And I promise, if you just keep that up, you will be found in some way at some point when it's ready and relevant for you. So that is just truly how wild getting fired can do. And also, once it happens to you once, especially if you think it was unfair, which personally is how I feel about my experience, you'd be surprised how much it would take to scare you after that. It's like, oh, okay, sure, I've lost all of this stuff, whatever. I didn't tear me down. It sucked. It felt icky. I was sad. I was mad. But after that, whatever. So I just want you to know, being fired feels like the end of the world, but it is not. And when you do get fired, just file for unemployment and then freak out for a week and then start pulling yourself together and looking around and getting it all together and all that stuff we all have to do to find work. But you will find more work, I promise. You'll find more work. Time will put it further and further behind you. It'll feel better once that happens. And honestly, genuinely listen to why you were fired. Because, something my brother tells me all the time is like people always think they're better than they think they are. And it's really difficult to have a mirror in front of you and face the fact you might not be as great as you think that you are. So if you're in a situation where you're being given feedback like that, ask yourself if it's true. It's okay if it's not true. But that's an extreme position to put someone in. And to be quite honest, it's really difficult to get fired from places just short of a global pandemic, So if you're in a situation where that's happening, maybe it's worthwhile to be like, is this true? Me personally, when my manager was screaming and yelling at me and I was telling my boss that that was unacceptable, and then everyone just said, that's just how he is. And then I started going to therapy because I was going to lose my fucking mind if I didn't. And I was asking for a little leniency. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, I don't care about my job. It's like, well, either that's true or what? So I thought it was a little bit silly. I still think it's a little bit silly. But you know what? I wasn't the manager. I wasn't the owner's best friend managing someone I was allowed to scream at, and everyone's hands were tied, and I thought it was bullshit, but you know what? It's fine. I'm fine. They're fine. Everyone's fine, and it doesn't really matter unless you want it to. So that is a wild, complicated time, but be open to feedback, because the best thing you can do also is listen to feedback. And, as you navigate your career, it's not really a bad idea to ask your manager once or twice a year for feedback, because the true reality is how people perceive you is reality. It doesn't matter what the truth is. You want the perception to be the truth. But if people are giving you feedback and you don't think that it's fair, you still have to listen to it, because that's what people think. And if you think that that is unacceptable, you have to change that perception and figure out where that breakdown of communication and visual is. And that's just the reality of this whole thing. And I think that's also why misunderstandings happen. I was 24. I barely knew what I was doing in an organization at all. So if I was fired because I looked disengaged and I kept messing up, and my manager probably thought I was just screwing up so much I didn't care. My perception was that he was screaming at me and not teaching me what he wanted me to do, and I wasn't going to beg a grown man who was yelling at me all the time to teach me if he wasn't going to take the time to do that. So we came to a stalemate crossroads. But guess who has more power? A manager. Not Lauren at the time. So the perception of that, honestly, might have been that everyone thought I was disengaged at my job. And, if I had understood that nuance, I could have understood that everyone thought that, and I could have tried to have corrected that with what my facts were. I'm not disengaged with my job. My manager's just screaming at me all the time. Like, how am I supposed to get better if I'm just being yelled at and not taught how to be better? And then maybe we could have had a more amicable way of working and worked through that problem versus discarding what we already had here. And so that's another thing that I mean. Like, your perception, like others people's perception of you does matter at work in that regard. So I wasn't savvy enough or old enough to quite understand that. And it took me a really long time as a worker and an older person to be open to the fact where it was like, oh, I was fired for being disengaged in my job. But if I looked at it from their point of view, regardless of what I believed to be true, it probably did look like that. So how mad can I be? However many years later, like 10 years later or whatever, I don't know. So it's just like a tricky thing. And I want you to be aware of all of those things. And if you're in a situation like this, it's scary. I get it. And I also know that when everyone kind of lost their job last year very suddenly, going back to work is just as scary, because you're like, what if I'm fired? What if they're going to fire me? I think they're going to fire me today. That is 100% an anxiety thing. And I'm not saying anything like that to like belittle that, But you need to believe what people tell you around you. People hired you. People believe you can do the job. They interview and look at 1 billion candidates, 1 billion portfolios. And when they call you in to work at that job, it's because they know you can do it. So you need to believe that too. Believe what people tell you, good or bad. Sit with yourself and decide if that is the truth, or if you need to change a perception somewhere for it to reflect what the truth is. And all of that will help you manage your anxiety of being fired constantly. And also, if you're unfortunately in that position and you are fired, there's a couple of actionable items you can put into play and reflection that you can use to be productive so that you're not in this situation again. And I'm really thankful to say, since then, I've never been fired. And hopefully I never am. So I hope that helps. And of course, you can find all of this stuff on the Patreon. Patreon's free. And, there's 2 paid perks. I do workbooks and everything. The new workbook just came out for September a couple days ago. Unless you're listening to this early, then it'll probably come out in 2 days. But there's that going on. You can always find me on the TikTok, The Creative Mentor. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and my own website. It's just Lauren Versino. I'm everywhere. I'm the only Versino really on the internet. That's kind of cool. And yeah, this whole month we're going to just kind of talk about the general, what's the process of leaving a job? How do you move on? How do you know when it's time to move on? All of those sort of ending things in your stepping stone through your career and all of that stuff. So next week, we'll talk about something like that. So till then, I will talk to you guys later.